Hello and welcome to my video. 5 ways to improve your painting. Okay, start off, keep it cheap. You don't need to spend a lot of money on equipment. These are hardware store-bought brushes. They cost a couple of euros each, literally, except for the big one, that's about 5 or 6. And that'll save you money to start with. I do have some expensive ones, but more on that later. The next thing, relax. Possibly not as much as this. So when I finally wake up, I'll continue. Okay, I'm awake. Now, first thing, make a mess. And that's what I'm going to be doing here. Before I get going, the board is 120 centimeters wide by 60 centimeters deep, quite big. So I've got 2 easels supporting it so it doesn't wobble about too much. The reason I advocate this method of painting is because a lot of people who want to paint believe they can't draw. Now, it doesn't matter if you can draw or not. Painting and drawing are completely different things. Drawing tends to be quite a precise art, whereas painting is a lot more relaxed. And really just go for it. The paint will make texture. The brush will, well, the brush will make the texture, but I guess the paint will as well. And just see what happens. We know at the beginning it's going to be a landscape, so it's going to be natural that you will want to make landscapey type shapes. And this technique does lend itself to it. So I know that it'll be a landscape. Oh, before I go on though, you can adapt this to painting portraits. So if you're already a portrait painter or you're wanting to have a go, you can use this approach for that too. Now in the mess, look for the picture. It's in there somewhere. The shapes that you make on the board or canvas if you want. I prefer to work on plywood myself because I like the flatness of the surface. I don't like the texture of canvas much. And try and achieve drama. Now, drama is one of these interesting things. How do you paint drama? Well, I think the only way I can explain it is by using big, bold, dynamic shapes. For instance, you can see that I've started to form the sky. And for those of you who've got this far and are thinking of turning off, this is how I start all my paintings. They don't stay like this. So if you would like to do me a big favor, hang around to the end because it helps my YouTube algorithm interaction. So stay with me and just trust me. By the way, before I go on, I painted this on my birthday, which was the 23rd of February. I can't believe that 60 years ago I was 8 years old. But anyway, it's just a number, I guess, and I'm getting used to it now. It's been 24 hours of being 68, so I'll cope. So yeah, happy birthday to you out there if you've got a birthday today, or if you were born in 1952. Good year, wasn't it? So now then, where are we? Yes, I'm still at the stage where I'm throwing paint on, but I can see the painting within the mess. And my focal point is going to probably be that hill in the middle. So I've made my mess, I've started to see the painting within the mess, and now it's a question of using my imagination to turn that into something. And it isn't, I say this and some people say, oh, well, it's easy for you to say this. I say, well, it gets easier now because I've done so many, but not everybody will agree. Some people will say, well, how on earth are you going to get a picture out of that? I mean, look at it. It's disgusting and it's brown. Well, stay with me. It'll turn into something else. It's a long video, this. I guess only the dedicated are going to stay to the end. I hope you do. It does actually improve my statistics on YouTube when people watch all the way through. So if you are going to, thank you. More than I can say. Thank you very much. While I carry on pushing paint around here, I'll just mention a few things about YouTube. I think YouTube's wonderful. There's so much on there now. It doesn't matter what you want to watch. You just type something into the search box. It'll find something that you're after. It's even helped me out a few times when my computers had problems. You'd find the answers to most things on YouTube. Obviously here I'm using paper now, just to sort of smear some of the colour, but I'm keeping in mind that I want drama, so I'm still keeping big broad shapes at the moment. And I don't go for fiddly. I go for the illusion of fiddly, or the illusion of detail, as I prefer to call it. And a little thing before I start rambling on about something else. You'll notice that I've made it lighter on the horizon. That's for later. That's so that when I add paint on the horizon, I won't have to fight the tone that I've put on there. It keeps the paint clean. And while you're watching also, I'll just talk about my teaching. If you're interested in coming to France to learn to paint like this, well, you either learn to paint like this or you learn how to loosen up. My focus tends to be to get people to loosen up. If they want to paint in this style, that's fine. That'll show you that also. It may be that your style is completely different, but you are a bit tight in your painting. When you adopt this method, it does loosen you up. And in painting, it is very important to stay loose as long as possible in your painting. There's nothing worse than a stiff picture. I'm going to be using this size brush for, well, I suppose most of the painting. It's about 2 inches wide, maybe 2.5 inches, because you can use it in so many ways. You can use the side, the tip, or the corner. So you want a smaller brush, just use the corner. Sometimes when I put the paint on the brush too, I have more red on one side of the brush than the other. Oh, and the colours, right, so I didn't mention the colours, did I? The colours are my usual ones. They are sap green, Payne's grey, and red ochre. Now, red ochre, a lot of people have asked me about red ochre. They say they can't get it. Well, you don't have to actually have red ochre. You could use cadmium red mixed with the sap green. That gives you your darks, and the darks are obviously very important in a painting. You mustn't be afraid of getting contrast at the beginning. What you don't want to do is do a very light picture and then try to add the darks later while it's wet, because it won't work. They will just mix with the light colour that you've already got on the picture, and they'll turn into a sludge, even more sludgy than this. It'll just turn into a mess. So get your contrasts established first. It's the reverse of watercolour. With watercolour, you start light and go dark. With oil, you start dark and you go light. And you will also probably notice by now that I get my lights by dragging through the paint with a paper towel. It's the quickest way to do it. And it works the same way on the landscape as it does the sky. In other words, I will drag the paint off so that if I want to add a pale green to that light streak on the side of the hill later, I will not be fighting the paint that is already on there. It keeps it clean. When you're at this stage of a painting, try not to finish anything. Don't be tempted to put in anything that looks remotely like detail. Now, as you can see here, I'm putting in some clumps of trees, but it's not detail. From what you're looking at on your screen, it may look like I'm starting to paint trees, and some of the bits of those trees may look detailed. Trust me, it's just an illusion. All I'm doing at the moment, I'm basically playing. I'm just playing with the paint to see what works and see what doesn't work. If you're interested in skies, the sky gets really fun later. I suppose this could be described as the boring part of the picture. I have to admit, it's dark and it's miserable and gloomy. Now, I'm a tonalist painter, and a lot of tonalist paintings are quite dark and gloomy. They weren't after gloomy. What they were after was a feeling of presence in a certain place, an ambient moment where the light is either just coming or just going. Not many tonalists paint pictures that are representing the middle of the day, for instance. It tends to be morning and evening. It's just what we like, I suppose. But you must admit, they are dramatic. If you look up any tonalists if you Google the name George Innes or Bruce Crane, any of those, you'll see exactly what I mean. And they were absolute masters of their craft. Quite dramatic. So here I will be going on to the sky quite soon. If you're a sky person, if you have trouble with skies, you can always skip forward and go to the sky section, but I think it's important that you also understand what you're going to put underneath the sky, what I call the side salad. My paintings focus on skies, and sometimes I see the landscape as, well, I hate to say it, but it's almost a bit of a nuisance, because I know I've got to have something underneath my sky, and you can do it in several ways. You can do something like this, which I think is going to end up as an interesting skyline, or you can just do the sort of simple flat line that has a few trees sprouting up. I don't really want to make my paintings quite that simple, because after all, I'm after the illusion of detail, and I quite like the little twinkly bits of detail that will appear later in this painting. I've really done my best in this one, by the way, especially for you, to keep out of the way. Quite a few of my videos have absolutely sensational shots of my right shoulder, sometimes my left shoulder, but usually the right. This one, I've worked hard to keep it out of the way, and I hope it works. On the subject of teaching, again, if you've been following me, you know that I teach. I teach in two ways. I have venues in France where you can come and you will be basically pampered, I suppose is the best way to describe that one. The place where I have my venues is a delightful place. It's got a swimming pool. It's a beautiful, very beautiful old house, immense gardens. It's even got a place where you can do yoga if you want to, and I think a lot of people actually do go there. They have one of these strange dome constructions, which is quite incredible to be in. I tested it out. If you stand in the middle of the dome and speak, it's like you are speaking to yourself in, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a surround sound. You hear yourself coming back to yourself in all different directions. It's quite a strange experience. So they have that for yoga. Did I mention a swimming pool? Yes, I think I might have done. They've got a nice swimming pool. And the people who own the place are excellent chefs. All the food is vegetarian, although I think you can eat meat there if you like, but you'd have to go and get it yourself and prepare it. They only handle vegetarian food. So I have that place, and I'm fully booked for June of this year. There's another one in August, and I got about 5 places left on that. But I also do one-to-one teaching, where people come here for usually 5 days. The teaching starts, it can be in the morning, I prefer the afternoons, from 1 to around 5 o'clock, sometimes 6, depending on how talkative I'm being. And yeah, it went very well last year. I had 35 people, I think. Everybody seemed happy. And this year, as a special offer, I'm actually giving everyone a painting. So if you come here to learn, on the first day, the student doesn't paint. I will paint a demo like this, not as big as this, but usually 80 centimeters by 60 deep, which is a fair size painting. I paint the demo. I talk incessantly to sort of loosen the person up, to get to know them, to find their strengths and weaknesses, and also to show them exactly how relaxed you have to be about it. And it does rub off. People, I think, learn much better when they see something appearing before their eyes, rather than you just talking about it. So I think if I just got people painting on the first day and told them what to do, it would be a little bit daunting for people. So if they see me do something, I think it does, the information is transmitted to the person in a much more successful way. On this painting now, I'm being a little bit exciting here. Now I've added to the colours. I don't usually do this, but I've added a little bit of royal blue with a touch of red ochre mixed in to the royal blue, just to get that sort of interesting, slightly purpley colour, which will almost disappear by the end. But of course, it will never completely disappear. It always adds to the patina of the painting. Always a little bit always shows through. One thing about teaching that I've always found interesting is repetition. And of course I repeat on my videos as well. I'm not being careful, even at this stage in the painting. I'm not attached to the picture. Now by that I mean I don't really care if it goes wrong, because I know it can be fixed. And if you're painting like this, you need to get that in your head. Doesn't matter what you do, particularly on the sky. The landscape to some extent is the same, but on skies it's incredibly flexible. You just see what appears. Don't spend too long in one spot. You notice that I keep darting about all over the painting. So I've got a bit of blue there, but why not a little bit more over on the left there? Just to, as I said, add to the patina of the picture. Makes it more interesting. Royal blue is one of my favourite colours. I really like royal blue. Not quite to the extent where I feel that I could eat it, but you must admit, it's a delicious colour. Here I'm using my big brush. This is, I'm not actually sure on this brush whether this is just a large paintbrush or a pasting brush for wallpaper. I suppose you could use it for either. And the reason I'm using that now is because when I put my sky on initially, it was extremely rough, and I scrubbed it around with paper, and that leaves marks all over it. Now by gently going over it with this large brush, very lightly, hardly touching it, I'm actually losing brush marks and scrape marks, so that the whole thing looks more cloudy, because clouds frankly don't have brush marks, do they? in a while I'll be going back down to do a bit more on the landscape. But before we get to that, here's a bit of titanium white. Now, because I've smoothed out the sky, I'm not adding oil to the white. This is straight from the tube, because there's enough oil on the picture, even though I've wiped it, there's enough there to make the paint fluid. And this is the point in the picture that I always think people are going to really think I've lost the plot. I'm chucking on white, and I'm not making cloud shapes. One of the rules I always tell people: avoid the cauliflower in the sky. The cauliflower in the sky is evil. Push it to the side. All I'm doing is applying some light. I know that I have a light spot there. I also know that along the horizon there will be a strong light. It's just one of the things I like to do in the sky. I will in the future be doing a completely different type of sky. I can't get enough of dramatic skies, but I'm also thinking, well, maybe I'll do some light ones as well, where you just have a really gorgeous pale blue, and as the ground colour. In other words, I probably won't start it using this method. I will use a completely different palette, but they'll all be light, fresh colours until I've got the distance in my sky established, and then on top of that I will add a few darks so that you'll have a feeling of depth in the sky. There's lots of information that you need to know about skies, by the way. One of the things is that clouds, a lot of people don't see this, or maybe they don't think about it, and it's not anyone's fault, you know, until you're shown something. How are you going to know? And this is going to sound incredibly obvious, but as clouds come over your head, they look bigger. The clouds in the distance look smaller. It's the same as the landscape. Trees in the foreground bigger, trees in the background smaller. I know it sounds like I'm talking to a 5-year-old here, and I don't mean to sound like that, but a lot of people seem to disregard it. They paint the sky almost as if it's a flat backdrop just hanging there, but it isn't. As the ground goes away and disappears in the distance, so does the sky. The sky is bigger over your head, smaller in the distance. So you have to get that into your picture, and that will happen later. So there we go again. More paint along the horizon. This is an interesting technique. This just basically ironing the paint on, and I don't care how it interacts with the landscape, because I'll be going over the landscape again and working the colour of the landscape into the sky. This is how you get instant perspective. Now, for those of you who may want to start your own YouTube channel, here's a bit of information for you. It is essential, I think, before you do that, to build up a following on Facebook. The reason I say this is because once you get people liking your pictures on Facebook, you can then start to build up a YouTube channel, make videos. Yeah, in fact, you don't have to make a video of you painting. What you could do is make up a video, a slideshow of your paintings. Add some music, which of course you can get free from YouTube, and a voiceover if you want. It's best not to use the electronic voiceovers. Avoid them like the plague. They're just inhuman. So if you can talk over your slideshow, fine. If not, you can use captions and just use the music that they supply. That red there, by the way, is a little bit of Japanese red, it's a little something for later. So I'll just push that in there. It is a mess at the moment, but if you're still here, thank you. Stay with me. I can't do this alone. So a bit of smearing just to spread it out. Some people wouldn't dream of doing that. Some people will just use a brush and keep smearing it with a brush, And of course, it's just not the same effect. So yeah, back to your YouTube now. What you do is you get your pictures on Facebook. You get a following. Every time someone likes one of your pictures or comments, it doesn't matter, you need to go and find the list of people who have liked or commented on one of your pictures, and you must acknowledge them. You've got to either click the thumbs up sign, or if they've asked a question, you must answer the question. And I do this every day, religiously, several times a day, even last thing at night, before I go to sleep. I go through, if there's a comment, I'll acknowledge it. If there's a question, I'll try to answer it. You have to do that. People want your attention, so you must give it. Once you've got a good Facebook following, then you start to make your YouTube videos. And the same applies to that. As soon as someone likes or, well, you won't know if they like it, but if someone comments on your YouTube, you have to acknowledge them. You need to let them know that you are paying attention to them. If you don't, they'll go away. I'm not sure what, I'll have to check on this, but I will, I have a feeling you need a certain number of followers before you can actually monetize your videos. I got a feeling it may be 2,000. I'm not sure, but there is definitely a number involved there. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I think it is 2,000 people. Once you reach that point, and it can happen really quickly, as long as you, well, I even tweet my videos as well, but you have to make Facebook and YouTube work together, or even Instagram. I'm on there as well, so if you want to connect to me on Instagram, my link will be in the box below. And eventually you'll come to the point where you can upload a video and you actually earn a bit of money every time somebody views your video. So the sky now, I'm smoothing again. And a little bit of Payne's grey there, just to get a bit of a shadow under that cloud. It's something I can't resist. To me, one of the most boring things on the planet is just a plain white fluffy cloud. They just don't do it for me. They don't yank my chain, as they say. I have to see the drama. Okay, bit more smoothing. When I do this, I sort of sweep the brush over the paint, and in my left hand I have a big wodge of kitchen towel, and every now and then I just take the surplus paint off the brush, because I want to move the paint. I don't want to lift it and then apply it somewhere else. I'm basically squeezing it across the surface to get the feeling of a cloud. And of course, even if you have a dramatic cloud, they're still, they have a softness about them. Okay, a little bit more Payne's grey. Repeating myself again, something I always tell people, don't forget that your cloud must bleed off the side of the picture. The cloud mustn't fit comfortably in your painting. It's got to have a life outside your picture. Imagine you're looking through a window at a cloud. Some of the cloud shows, some of it doesn't, so allow for that. It will give your paintings more realism. One thing, let's go through a few questions and answers. One thing that people ask me, I would think 3 or 4 times a week, can I get this effect with acrylics? The answer I can give you is, well, frankly, no. I've tried, it didn't work. You don't have the flexibility. You can spray water on it, you can use retardants, but you won't get the same effect as you will with oil. And also, people will sometimes put off oil paint because they think it stinks. Now, oil paint doesn't really smell. The thing that you're smelling is the turpentine or the thinners. I recommend that you don't use turpentine. When I finish painting, I put my brushes in a square plastic bucket with detergent, which is just the stuff that you use to wash your clothes in a washing machine. I have enough in there just to cover the bristles. I mush it around a bit, and then I just clean them under the tap later. It'll get your brush clean and it smells wonderful. There's a saying about turpentine: if you're not allergic to it, you will be. So get off it as soon as you can. You don't need it. It's just. And the other thing is, so a lot of people don't know this, that turpentine, the way it works is it breaks down the oil in the paint. Now, if you're painting a picture and you're diluting your paint with turpentine, basically you are making the paint less stable. There is a sort of tip over point where you can use so much that in a few years there's a big danger of your painting fading dramatically, because frankly it won't be strong enough. The binder, which is the oil, there won't be enough in the paint to actually hold the paint on the surface. So it's another reason for not using it. This bit here now, this is Payne's grey with a tiny bit of royal blue added, just a little bit, just to vary the tone in the sky. Now, other people ask me questions. Let me just check through my list here. Other things that people ask me. How do you hang a painting like this on the wall? If it's only 5mm thick, how are you going to hang it on the wall? If you put a screw in the back, it's going to come through. Well, don't put a screw on the back. What I do is I don't hang them. I leave that to whoever buys my paintings. So the only thing I do is advise them on the type of frame. Now, this style of painting, for some reason, a very thick, chunky, gold gilt frame suits this sort of painting. And the hanging wire would be affixed to the frame, not the painting. So that hopefully covers that question. Another one that I'm asked, how do you stop your painting becoming muddy? Well, I think I might have covered that a little bit earlier, is in that I put the paint down and I wipe off the areas where I want the light, so that I'm not putting white on a thick lump of colour. It's still wet on wet, and well, as you can see, this is the effect you get. It keeps the colours clean. Next question I'm asked. People say, oh, can I send you pictures of my paintings? Well, yes, you can if you want. If you go to my Facebook page and contact me via that, the link will be below. You can send me a photograph of your painting in a message, and I will get back to you with a bit of info that might help you. It may take me a while because I have hundreds of messages, and it's just down to work pressure. But I will get back to you eventually, and be prepared though. I'm not necessarily going to be Mr. Nice and say, oh, that's wonderful. If you want criticism, I'll give it to you, but it's always constructive. What else? When you come here to learn, on my first day, as I said, I'd do a painting. This year, as a special offer, when I do the demo painting, you get to keep it. It'll be yours. So you get lessons and you also get a painting. They'll always be the same size. I'm painting this one big, especially for my just for this YouTube. My standard size is 80 by 60 centimeters. I'll find out what that is in inches and I'll put it on the screen so that people in America will know what I'm talking about. When I get to the end of this painting, this is not a finished painting. This is what I call my, well, permanent drawing, really. I get to the stage that you'll see at the end. We're just over, well, we're about 2/3 of the way through here. What happens next is I will leave the picture to dry. Now that will take probably at least 2 to 3 weeks before it's dry enough for me to add a glaze. I've made other videos on glazing, which of course you're welcome. Please, in fact, go and look at them, which explains glazing. But I will also make a video of me glazing this picture. And it's quite an amazing effect. It is one of the easiest parts of painting. It's literally the application of paint over this painting when this is dry, with slightly more oil than paint. You just put it on. If you want your picture to lean towards blue, you just put a blue over the top and then wipe off the bits where you want less blue. Basically work it into the picture using paper, kitchen towel type stuff. It's a very satisfying thing to do, actually. You can completely change the direction of a picture. So as you can see here, I'm palette knifing, again, very roughly. What I said earlier about don't become attached to your painting. You've got to maintain a distance, even though you may think, wow, this is starting to look really cool. You know, don't suddenly then go into detail mode and start trying to throw in details that you think will impress you and other people. It doesn't necessarily work well. Keep it as loose as you can all the way through, right up to the end. At the end of this picture, the last section that I will be concentrating on is what I call the fine-tuning, and I'll be adding some tiny little blobs, literally blobs of contrast in the distance, just to give the feeling of distant trees and rolling hills. And it's the only fiddly bit of the painting, I guess, really, because it's everything is really bold at the moment, big, bold sort of strokes. And even at this stage, if the painting went wrong now, well, there is no wrong. What's the worst that can happen? You know, I might move the brush the wrong way. Well, if I do, I'll just wipe it off and have another go at it. I'll tell you a story. I had a very interesting, well, I've had a very interesting career. 14 years of it was spent working as a magazine design editor in London for a very well-known British magazine, which was all about life in the country. And I think it's England's possibly second or third oldest magazine. It's been going since 1897. And I had a delightful day once. I was actually off work for a while. I wasn't very well, so I was sitting at home and painting pictures and watching cooking programs on TV, and the phone rang, and I'd started to feel better, and it was the editor of the magazine I worked on, and he was being very pleasant and said, look, would you like to do something while you're at home? Because you live very close to Lord Snowdon. And for those of you who may know, Lord Snowdon was the husband of Princess Margaret. And he said, he just lives up the road from you, and he's going to be the guest editor on the magazine. Would you like to spend a day with him and go through his photographs? He was a society photographer. And so I said, well, yeah, why not? So I'll drag myself over there, which I did, and I met him, and he was quite delightful, very nice, very easygoing, interesting person to talk to. And I ended up sitting with him in his kitchen, having a late breakfast, which consisted of a very large glass of wine, looking through his photographs to choose which ones would go in the magazine. And we were working through and gradually getting more and more drunk. And eventually he said, oh, I trust you. You just choose what you like. Let's have a tour. So I had a tour of his house, which was quite amazing. And then just ended up sitting there for the rest of the day just chatting about everything, really, all kinds of stuff. He was a very interesting guy, and he really didn't want to talk about photographs. What he wanted to do was show me some of his drawings and also his designs that he did. Not a lot of people know this, but he designed the bird aviary at London Zoo back in the 60s. So he showed me drawings that he had done for that, and it was a delightful day. Ended up a little bit too drunk to drive home, so he allowed me to stay and chat until I was fit to drive, and then off I went home. But yeah, delightful guy. In fact, some of the things he told me about the royal family, I daren't repeat them here, I'll tell you. Anyway, enough of that. Interesting time now. I ended up giving him some free drawing lessons. So here, back to the painting, I'm still not doing anything that could be remotely described as detail, just a few very simple shapes. One thing that people say to me that they like about my videos is that I don't do any speeding up. Now, I put up some videos a few years ago where I did do time-lapse, and they got a certain amount of views, not really very many, because frankly, I don't think people want that. If you're a serious painter, you actually want to see how long it takes to do a particular section of your painting. And I tend to agree, because what's the point of me condensing all this down to 5 minutes? All you'll see is me showing off, frankly, and I don't see any point in that. You need to see how the thing is constructed, and if it's just going to be a quick a video that literally flies past you, you're not going to learn anything from it, really. So I suppose they could be entertaining for some people, but not if you're a serious painter. I don't think they are. I think the only problem with real-time paintings is if you take 6 hours on a painting, that's going to be hard work. This painting from start to finish took 1 hour and 20 minutes. And of course, I've done a lot of editing on it, so I've taken out that shoulder, which of course I did promise you wouldn't appear again, but there it is. It'll go in a minute. I kept this bit because even though I'm in the way, you can still see what I'm doing with the brush. Yeah, I think a 9 hour painting, that would be a marathon. it would be probably better to be broken down into 9 separate videos. But even then, that's still going to be hard work. So I tend to work quite quickly when I'm doing a video, just so that I can squeeze it all in a time span that people will actually be able to cope with. So I hope. Let me know what your thoughts are on that, and maybe I'm wrong. Could be wrong, but according to YouTube, on a few sites that I've seen, people have said you have to hold your audience for as long as possible, and most people tend to lose interest either at the 3-minute mark or around 11 or 12 minutes. If you've got them at 11 or 12 minutes, there's a good chance you may have them to the end of your video. So if you are still here, again, thank you. You are helping me buy more paint. Now, back to the sky. Big brush, nice bit of blending. I quite enjoy doing this. It's very satisfying. It's just the feel of it. And it's a bit like that Forrest Gump quote. You know, painting like this is like a box of chocolates. Until you get the big brush on it, you don't really know what you're going to get. So it's quite exciting. And as you can see, it's a very effective way to paint clouds. Just going back to YouTube for a few moments, one thing I really enjoy is the interaction that I get from people. Don't be afraid to ask me questions. You know, what is it that what would you like me to paint? By the way, before we go on any further, I don't want to paint pine trees on mountains with log cabins and waterfalls. Someone else has already done that, and I think his name might have been Ross something. So, but you know, if you want to ask me questions, if you want to tell me what you find hard, I'll try and cover them in my next video. Well, next video but one, because the next one is going to be me glazing this picture. So now we get to fine tuning. Now, again, this is nothing to do with detail. This is me just tidying up a little bit. So that little bit of green that was poking out there, didn't like that, so that's gone. I'll be adding texture using paper, and I'm in a moment going to be adding some distant trees. So I'm going to be using different brushes in a moment. These are my expensive brushes. Interestingly, quite a lot of the expensive ones are the really small ones. I just need to finish off that tree in the foreground there with the big brush first. Yeah, while I'm doing that, you can see there, I'm adding texture to the foreground. And you also have to bear in mind, as I do this, all these rough marks in the foreground, when the glaze goes on top of them, they'll change. It will completely change the picture. So they are the bits, what you're seeing there, those scratchy lines in the foreground, they are the bits that will show through the glaze. Just a little bit of tweaking there. Yeah, ask me questions. Anything you like, really. Doesn't really matter. Okay, now this is, believe it or not, that's an expensive brush. When I start to use these other brushes, this is my favourite shape. It's a filbert, which is a very, very versatile brush for several reasons. A, they hold a lot of paint, and they are exactly the right size for painting mid-distant trees. And you'll see that as I work along that line. Literally just a push, and there you are. You have a distant tree. Now these trees look very dark at the moment, which is good. I want them dark. I can't show the light on the tree unless I make it dark first. I've got to have something for the light to react to. And you see the streaks that I've put on that field there. It looks like someone's ploughed that field, and just below that bit, to the left of where the brush is now, you can see there's a light bit sweeping around underneath. Looks like a tractor might have driven through there. I'm always looking for things like this. You know, when I'm not painting, if I'm going out shopping, quite often I will. Shopping is never a straightforward thing with me. I set off in the car. I'll see a nice bit of scenery that I like, and I get out and I look at it. And luckily, all I've got to do is look at it for a few minutes, and it's in my head. So, yeah, trees in the distance, they are blobs. You know, you don't see twigs. Quite often you don't even see the trunk. Just blobs. And if you look at the horizon line again over there in the distance, because I've pushed the landscape up into the clouds, it's quite obvious what's happening. The two colours blend together. It produces what's called the Tinsdale effect, which is dust particles in the atmosphere which get in the way of your vision. They reflect the sunlight, and that's why things go blue as they get further away from you. And it's the quickest way I know to actually get that effect. In a moment, I'll be getting a slightly smaller brush, which is even more expensive than that one, I think. The brushes I use, in case anyone is interested, the good brushes, they're made by a company in London, and I'm not paid to say this, they don't even know I'm going to say it. It's Jackson's of London, and these brushes are called Black Hogs. They're excellent brushes. They're extremely durable. You can scrub them, you know, with soap after you've finished. You can have paint on it and stab it into your picture, which I quite often do in moments of frustration. They take a lot of punishment. They clean up well, and the bristles don't drop out. It's a very important point with brushes. You don't want bristles dropping out all over the place. So now I'm putting a little bit of light on the trees, which again demonstrates what I was just saying. You have to have the dark to show the light. If those trees were like a mid-tone green and I was trying to get highlights on them, I'd be struggling. So again, Black Hog, I'm just working along that line down the picture, and then once I've got that established, I will be doing some distant trees with, as I said, a much smaller brush. The light spots that I've left under those trees, they look as though they're floating in the air. The reason I've got those is I'll be using one of my other brushes, which is called a rigger, which is a very thin brush, to put in some tree trunks later. Now, here's the rigger. Just a few downstrokes just to connect the tree to the planet. That's all you need. We're actually coming quite close to the end of the picture now, so I'll just say a few things while you watch. If you've got this far, thank you very much. If you've liked my video, please subscribe and hit the bell button. That'll tell you when I'm going to upload another video. I also have a Patreon page in case you're filthy rich and you want to donate. If you don't want to, doesn't matter, I won't hold it against you. What else I need to say? Yeah, well, stand by for the next video. It shouldn't be too long. It'll be probably, I would think, 2 to 3 weeks, allowing for this to dry, and then I'll be glazing it. Before I go, you're just about to see me put in some distant trees with quite a tiny brush here, just a few. Well, sometimes I paint the tree, sometimes I push the paint around, as you can see what I'm doing there to make that little bump just on the horizon there. So I'm using the available paint there, just making the top of that look bit more interesting. And as I do it, I'm pushing it into the sky just to make sure it falls back into the distance. So I'm going to leave you to listen to the music. Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.